Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You brought us an incredible stack of sources today, focused on a life that feels almost too expansive to be real.
It really does.
We are deep diving into Arnold Schwarzenegger,
Yeah.
a man who, frankly, defined three separate, intensely demanding careers.
It's a study in relentless, multifaceted ambition. I mean, we're not just looking at a successful actor or a champion athlete or a politician.
Yeah.
We are analyzing a cultural architect who fundamentally reinvented himself across, 3 decades. And in doing so, he reshaped our concepts of physical potential, blockbuster heroism, and eventually political leadership.
In one of the world's largest economies, no less.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this for you, for the learner. Our mission here is to take these sources and really understand the actual engine driving this success. We need to go beyond the myth. We're looking for the defining conflicts, the insights. So how did the poverty and, the trauma of his childhood in Austria become the fuel for his American ambition?
And how did that extreme, almost obsessive physical discipline translate directly into political power?
Right. And crucially, what was the private personal cost of setting such intensely public, decades-long goals?
We absolutely have to move chronologically. I think that's the only way to do it. We have to start right at the beginning.
The foundation.
The foundations of the Austrian oak, because that's key to understanding the sheer force of will he developed. It's the origin story of a relentless self-made man.
That sets the stage perfectly. We begin with part one, the foundation's bodybuilding and the rise of the Austrian oak.
Let's do it.
Arnold Alois Schwarzenegger was born in Thal, Styria, Austria. That's on July 30th, 1947. The sources really emphasize that his youth was set against this backdrop of post-war scarcity.
And rigid, traditional European conformity.
Yeah. So what was the material reality of his upbringing like?
It was incredibly sparse. I mean, particularly when you contrast it with the immense wealth he would later accumulate. He grew up in a strict Catholic household,
Right.
and money was just a constant source of stress. He often recounted that simply getting a refrigerator.
A refrigerator.
Yeah, a major appliance, a sign of modernity, was a major high point for his family, a powerful status symbol in Thal.
Wow.
So that scarcity, that constant awareness of lack, became this profound early motivator to just completely reject that life.
And tied to that economic hardship was a challenging and often traumatic domestic environment. The discipline enforced by his father, Gustav, was extreme.
The sources, including Arnold's own memoirs, make it very clear that he suffered what we would classify today as child abuse. He spoke of being hit with belts, having his hair pulled, and the severity was, unfortunately not uncommon in the rigid German-Austrian culture of the time. The expectation was absolute conformity.
Sure.
But what's so fascinating and what became the driving force is that Arnold saw this environment not as a reason to submit, but as a reason to rebel, to escape.
So he didn't just survive the pressure. He used it as kindling for this huge fire.
Exactly. He made the conscious decision. Every time I got hit and every time someone said, you can't do this, I said, this is not going to be for much longer because I'm going to move out of here.
He just decided.
He decided, I want to be rich. I want to be somebody. And adding to this pressure was the fact that his father, Gustav, who was the local police chief, clearly favored his older brother, Meinhard.
Why was that?
It was due to these long-held, unfounded suspicions that Arnold was not his biological son.
Wow.
Yeah, the sources describe that favoritism as both strong and blatant, and it just pushed Arnold further into his own world, his own ambitions.
We have to address the layer of complexity his father introduced, particularly regarding his history during World War II, which became a significant public issue during the 2003 gubernatorial campaign.
Gustav Schwarzenegger is certainly a controversial part of this origin story. The records confirm that following the Anschluss in 1938, he joined the Nazi Party, and in 1939, he joined the SA, the Sturmabteilung.
The brown shirts.
Yep. And throughout World War II, Gustav served as a military policeman. This meant he was involved in logistical and enforcement operations across major fronts.
Including some of the worst of the war.
Oh, yeah. The invasion of Poland, the campaign in France, and the massive invasion of the Soviet Union.
He was specifically involved in the harrowing siege of Leningrad, correct?
That's right. He rose to the rank of Hauptfeldwebel and served actively in those theaters until 1942, when he was wounded near Leningrad and also contracted malaria.
Okay.
He was ultimately discharged from the military in early 1944. The record says no longer fully fit for field duty, and then he just resumed police work until 1947.
It's crucial to maintain our balance here. What does the research tell us about his specific role in any wartime atrocities?
So the consensus, and this includes analysis from Holocaust scholar Michael Berenbaum, is that while Gustav served in theaters of the war where atrocities were committed,
Places like Poland and the Soviet Union.
right, the available documents do not establish his direct personal role in those specific actions. But this history provides vital context for Arnold's later political views. His entire philosophy, his embrace of rugged American individualism and free enterprise, was a deliberate, total rejection of that restrictive, conformist, and failed European past represented by his father's generation.
This rejection, this fierce desire to forge a destiny entirely separate from Thal, it all crystallized in his commitment to the Iron Game.
That's it.
He chose bodybuilding as a career path at age 14, even though his father tried to push him toward, Bavarian curling?
Bavarian curling, yeah. But his decision was absolute. He discovered weightlifting around 1960 when his soccer coach took the team to a local gym.
And it just clicked.
What started as an interest immediately became an obsession, the singular focus of his life. His dedication was immediately legendary, even extreme.
The famous anecdote.
The anecdote about breaking into the local gym on weekends when it was closed, climbing through windows just to train, it speaks volumes.
It's that famous quote that perfectly sums up his internal pressure, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. He said, "It would make me sick to miss a workout. I knew I couldn't look at myself in the mirror the next morning if I didn't do it."
This wasn't just about exercise.
No. It was about self-mastery. It was about escaping the constraints of his reality. And this intensity clashed directly with his civic duty. In 1965, he was required to serve 1 year in the Austrian army.
But even the military couldn't slow his pursuit of the Mr. Europe title.
Not a chance. He went AWOL absent without official leave during basic training to compete in and win the Junior Mr. Europe contest.
And the consequence.
A week in military prison. But to him, that was a small, acceptable price for achieving a major goal. Bodybuilding was his ticket to America, and he wasn't going to let regulations hold him back.
He started small, placed second in his first big contest in '66, but the transition from there was incredibly swift.
Remarkably swift. He spent some time in London improving his rudimentary English, but more importantly, he was working on his weakest points, his legs, under the guidance of a judge who recognized his raw potential.
And it worked.
By 1967, at the age of 20, he won the NBA Mr. Universe title. He was the youngest person ever to do so. That same year, he fulfilled his plan and moved to the U.S. in October 1968, settling in Venice, California.
The Mecca. Training under Joe Weider at Gold's Gym, he quickly conquered the competitive apex of the sport.
He captured his first Mr. Olympia title in 1970 at age 23, still the youngest champion in the contest's history.
A record that still stands.
It does. And he would go on to win 7 Mr. Olympia titles in total. His physical specifications were just staggering for the time. 6'2", a contest weight of 235 pounds, and a 57-inch chest.
And it wasn't just aesthetics. The sources highlight his pure strength, too.
Absolutely. The man was a powerlifter. He could bench press 520 pounds and deadlift 683 pounds.
Right.
And, going back to his Austrian roots, he won the Munich stone lifting contest, lifting a monstrous 560-pound stone.
That's incredible.
It's that blend of massive sculpted physique and raw, old-world strongman power that earned him the moniker the Austrian Oak.
Here is where we must connect his physical discipline to the intellectual engine we promised to explore. How did he translate visualization and extreme training into a broader life philosophy?
This is the crucial link. Arnold developed what he called his 6 rules of success, based entirely on his bodybuilding experience. Rule number 1 was trust yourself. But the most potent was the power of visualization.
Right.
He believed that the mind needed to have a finished, absolute, detailed picture of the goal, the Mr. Olympia trophy, the movie script, the governor's office, before the body or the actions could follow.
So if he could visualize a perfect 57-inch chest, he could certainly visualize a political victory or a blockbuster contract. Just compounding ambition.
Precisely. His high-volume training philosophy, shocking the muscles with intensity, translated into shocking the system with unexpected moves, like the twins' comedy deal or the political recall run.
It's the same pattern.
He treated his life goals like a complex muscle group that needed constant, varied, and intense stimulation to grow.
However, this era of intense goal setting also gave rise to significant early controversies. The 1977 documentary Pumping Iron made him famous, but it also painted a picture of ruthlessness.
It did. The most infamous moment was his claim in the film that he skipped his own father's 1972 funeral to train for a contest.
Which was later revealed to be not exactly true.
Right. It was later admitted by both Arnold and the producer to be dramatized. They took the story from another bodybuilder purely to create a colder, more driven, almost villainous image for the camera.
Plus, it was manufactured drama. But was there a kernel of truth about his detachment?
There was. While the funeral story was faked, the sources note that his first serious girlfriend, Barbara Baker, observed his lack of emotion concerning the deaths of both his father and, a year earlier, his brother, Meinhard.
Meinhard died in a drunk driving crash in 1971.
Yes. And she said he compartmentalized profound tragedy in service of the grand plan. That is a highly revealing character trait.
That detachment was fully tested in the 1980 Mr. Olympia comeback. Why did he return, and why was that victory so widely disputed?
He returned secretly. He had officially retired, but while he was preparing for his role as Conan, he was in excellent shape and just decided to jump into the contest with only 7 weeks of focused preparation.
And the controversy.
It erupted because many competitors and critics felt his conditioning and his overall muscle mass, particularly in his legs, were not up to par compared to rivals like Mike Mentzer.
It sounds like his celebrity had already begun to overshadow objective competitive judgment.
That is exactly what Mentzer and other rivals claimed. They felt the judges were blinded by his fame and the drama of his return. Mentzer, who came in 5th, felt totally cheated and retired immediately after the contest, saying the sport had become purely political.
So the power of the Arnold brand was already a factor.
It was already influencing results, foreshadowing his later crossover success.
We also have to address the elephant in the room regarding the competitive reality of that era: steroid acknowledgement.
Schwarzenegger was remarkably transparent about this when asked, especially because at the time he was competing, anabolic steroids were not illegal. In 1977, he specifically discussed his usage, claiming he used them not primarily for muscle growth, but for muscle maintenance while going through the incredibly strict dieting phase, the cutting up phase, before a competition.
He called them tissue-building drugs.
Exactly.
And later, when this usage was weaponized against him, particularly regarding his heart health, he fought back aggressively.
He did. When he became a public figure in politics, his past was heavily scrutinized. In 1999, he sued a German doctor who publicly predicted his early death due to steroid use and his heart problems.
And he won.
He won a libel judgment because the doctor had never even examined him. He took that same aggressive, dominant approach, crushing perceived weakness, to defending his image in the press.
It speaks to the idea that from the very beginning, whether it was physical form, competitive results, or public narrative, he controlled the outcome with absolute force. So the ambition that built the strongest man translated into the beginning of the biggest movie star. The question now is, how do you take an image built on mass and aggression and translate that into the delicate machinery of Hollywood?
That's a great transition because the challenges he faced in Hollywood were almost identical to the ones he faced in Austria. People telling him he didn't fit the mold.
Which brings us right to part 2. The action hero Hollywood and the crossover success.
There we go.
Let's discuss the rocky start and early triumphs. For a man who achieved global fame so rapidly in sports, the initial resistance from the film industry must have been frustrating.
It was incredibly frustrating. Hollywood agents, casting directors, they gave him 4 major strikes. His body was too weird.
Too muscular.
Too muscular, too bulky. His name is too long. Schwarzenegger was unmarketable. His accent was too thick and he was too tall. They basically told him he had to become a different person to succeed.
Which was a familiar refrain from his childhood.
Exactly. He responded by doing what he always did, doubling down on his unique characteristics.
His first film, Hercules in New York in 1970, saw him credited as Arnold Strong.
And his accent was so heavy that his lines were dubbed over entirely. It was a humiliating start, but he was persistent, and the sheer force of his personality started to break through.
And he got recognition.
He got his first major recognition outside of bodybuilding by winning a Golden Globe for New Star of the Year actor for Stay Hungry in 1977.
And of course, Pumping Iron in '77 helped bridge that gap between his athletic persona and his acting aspirations, showing audiences his larger-than-life character. But the true cinematic breakthrough came with the sword and sorcery genre.
Conan the Barbarian in 1982 was the role that proved he could carry a major film. It was a box office success, led to a sequel. But if Conan was the breakthrough,
The Terminator was the one.
The Terminator in 1984, directed by James Cameron, was the signature role that cemented his image. The role of the emotionless, cybernetic killing machine was perfectly tailored to his physical presence and his limited, heavily accented dialogue.
That iconic delivery of "I'll be back" launched him into the heart of the 1980s action hero wars.
Which brings us to rivalry, revenue, and range.
Yes.
This is where the competitive fire from bodybuilding translated directly into box office strategy. The rivalry with Sylvester Stallone defined the mid-80s to mid-90s action film landscape.
They were engaged in an intense public and private feud.
Oh yeah, using the press to fight and, crucially, using their films as competitive vehicles.
They were literally trying to outdo each other on screen, weren't they?
They were. The competition involved escalating the sheer scale of the action, bigger explosions, larger weapons, and yes, counting who had the higher on-screen kill count in films like Commando versus Rambo. It was an era of hyper-masculinity taken to an extreme.
But the sources suggest that what gave Arnold the commercial edge over Stallone was his ability to infuse his action roles with self-awareness, with humor.
That's the key insight. Stallone was often very serious, very gritty. Arnold successfully inserted humor in those famous one-liners.
"You're a funny guy, Sully. I like you. That's why I'm going to kill you last."
Right. And that made his violence palatable and fun for a broader family audience. He delivered a series of massive hits: Predator in '87, Total Recall in '90, and The Spectacular True Lies in 1994.
And then, the calculated risk that proved his commercial genius. The move into comedy with twins in 1988, alongside Danny DeVito.
That was a huge gamble. Studios were resistant. They had a known formula for guaranteed action money, and they saw comedy as undermining that.
But Arnold understood he needed to prove his range.
And expand his market appeal beyond the 17 to 25-year-old male demographic.
The way he structured the deal for twins demonstrates his exceptional financial acumen, independent of his acting talent.
This is a vital point for you, for the learner interested in business strategy. He took no upfront salary.
A staggering decision for a star of his magnitude.
Instead, he relied entirely on profit participation, or the back end of the film's earnings, after the studio recouped their expenses. This wasn't just a risk, it was a strategic power move. He bet on himself.
And it paid off.
When the film was a massive success, it resulted in a paycheck estimated at over $40 million.
So he didn't just earn a huge paycheck. He fundamentally changed how A-list stars could negotiate outside of their comfort genre. He proved he was an enterprise first and an actor second.
It was compound interest on his star power. His commercial peak was arguably Terminator 2, Judgment Day in 1991, which just redefined special effects and became the highest-grossing film of the year.
The critic Roger Ebert nailed his talent at the time.
He did. He noted his genius lay in selecting roles that built upon his unique physical and vocal characteristics rather than trying to hide them.
But Hollywood's success is cyclical. The source's market declined starting in the mid-90s. What happened?
Fatigue set in. First, the self-aware action comedy spoof Last Action Hero in 1993 failed commercially.
It was just dominated by Jurassic Park that summer.
Totally. Then came the critical failure of Batman and Robin in 1997, where he played Mr. Freeze. That film was widely panned and seemed to mark the beginning of his blockbuster formula running out of steam.
Subsequent films struggled to recapture that magic.
Exactly. Films like End of Days, The Sixth Day, and Collateral Damage just didn't land with audiences the way his earlier hits had. He needed another Terminator to revitalize the brand.
Which he got with Terminator 3. Rise of the Machines in 2003. Right before his massive political pivot.
And even with the decline, his films have collectively grossed over $5.4 billion worldwide, an astronomical number.
He then shifted entirely, which brings us to his return to the screen post-governorship. For 7 years, he effectively pressed pause on his acting career.
From 2004 to 2010, his appearances were limited to short, often uncredited cameos, fulfilling old obligations, like in The Rundown or The Expendables.
Right.
When he left office in 2011, he was ready to jump back in, but a major personal crisis forced him to halt all projects.
Including the highly publicized Stan Lee collaboration, The Governator.
Yeah, that planned comic book and animated series was just stopped in its tracks.
Once that personal issue was addressed, he returned strong.
He did. His first leading role in a decade was The Last Stand in 2013. Followed by a reunion with Stallone in Escape Plan the same year. He returned to the Terminator franchise, though with diminishing success.
But his most significant recent transition has been into the streaming era.
That's where he's adapted his brand for the digital age.
How so?
The Netflix docuseries Arnold in 2023 provided a comprehensive retrospective look at his 3 careers, which served as a powerful brand relaunch.
And then came Fubar,
Then he secured his first leading scripted television role in the action comedy Fubar. That show debuted at #1 globally for Netflix, cementing his ability to transition his star power and physical humor into any new format. It proves his image, built on the action hero archetype he perfected, remains viable, even in his 70s.
So the ambition that built the strongest man translated into the biggest movie star and a commercial genius. The question now is, how does a persona built on mass, aggression, and calculated risk translate into the delicate machinery of political office, and what happens when that force of will runs up against political reality?
That is the essential transition.
Yeah.
We move now to part 3, the Governator Politics and Policy. His political identity was formed the moment he stepped off the plane in 1968.
Let's discuss his political ideology and public life. He was instantly drawn to the Republican Party. Why?
This choice is deeply rooted in his rejection of his Austrian origins. When he arrived in 1968, he was watching the presidential race between Nixon and Humphrey. He needed a translator.
Okay.
And when he heard the Democratic rhetoric talk of government support, collective responsibility, extensive social safety nets, it immediately reminded him of the stifling socialism he had just fled.
The world he escaped.
The world where, as he noted, 18-year-old kids were already discussing their retirement pensions.
And then he heard the Republican message.
He heard Richard Nixon talking about free enterprise, lowering taxes, getting the government off the backs of the individual. For Arnold, this was a philosophy that championed the individual struggle, the self-made man, the ultimate escape from conformity.
So he just decided on the spot.
He asked, what party is he? When told Republican, he declared, then I am a Republican. He links his philosophical inspiration directly to figures like economist Milton Friedman.
And we have tangible proof of that philosophical alignment. He introduced the 1990 PBS series, Free to Choose, hosted by Friedman.
It's a crucial historical marker. In that introduction, he powerfully championed individualism. He stated that being free to choose meant pursuing your own goals, setting your own destiny, without the government breathing down on your neck.
And he explicitly contrasted it with his past.
He explicitly contrasted this American ideal with the socialistic country where the government controls the economy that he had escaped.
But the softening of that rugged individualism, the path toward public service, was heavily influenced by the Kennedy family.
The Kennedy connection is vital for understanding his path to the governorship. He married Maria Shriver, niece of JFK, and daughter of Sergeant and Eunice Kennedy Shriver in 1986.
And he credited them with that shift.
He often credited the political legacy and public service ideals of her family, particularly her mother, Eunice, the founder of the Special Olympics, with inspiring him to think beyond his own career and into public service. They became his political heroes.
He started small, appointed by George H.W. Bush to serve as chairman of the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports from 1990 to 1993, but the massive leap came in 2003.
The recall and governorship campaign of 2003 was pure, vintage Schwarzenegger shock and awe. California was suffering from an energy crisis, a budget deficit, and the recall election against Governor Gray Davis was unprecedented.
And how did he announce?
He announced his candidacy on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, leveraging his celebrity for immediate, massive global attention. He was instantly dubbed the Governator.
He was elected governor with 48.6% of the vote, defeating his primary Democratic opponent, Cruz Bustamante, and became only the second foreign-born governor of California. The entire political establishment was asking, what kind of Republican is this?
He defined himself as a very specific political commodity. Fiscally conservative and socially liberal.
Yeah.
He was trying to occupy the center ground that historically had been successful in California politics.
How did that play out?
This moderation played out in policies like abortion, where he called himself pro-choice but supported parental notification for minors. And on gay rights, he was a vocal supporter and even performed a same-sex marriage ceremony during his tenure.
Wait, if he was a strong supporter of gay rights, how do the sources reconcile the fact that he twice vetoed bills that would have legalized same-sex marriage in 2005 and 2007?
That is the perfect question to highlight his strategic centrism.
Was that pragmatism or political maneuvering?
The vetoes were largely seen as political pragmatism necessary to survive in a divided state. While he personally supported the principle, he argued at the time that the measures were unnecessary because the issue was tied up in state courts.
So he was trying to avoid alienating his base.
He was trying to avoid alienating the fiscally conservative wing of the Republican Party, which was essential for his other agenda items, like fiscal reform. That duality, personal support versus political action, defines his governorship.
That centrist position also manifested in his rejection of the far left. He twice vetoed single-payer healthcare bills, once in 2006 and again in 2008.
His actions were consistently fiscally conservative. Early in his tenure, he repealed an unpopular vehicle registration fee increase and blocked the issuance of driver's licenses to undocumented immigrants, securing early victories with the Republican base.
The early political battles were fierce and personal. He deployed his Hollywood tactics against the legislature with the famous girly men comment. How did that tactic land with serious Sacramento lawmakers?
It was pure Hollywood brawn entering the political arena, and it was certainly polarizing. He aimed the comment at Democratic opponents who were obstructing his agenda. It was a calculated use of his tough guy persona to mock the seriousness of politics.
But it backfired.
Well, while it delighted his base, it deepened the antagonism with the legislature, ultimately leading to a major setback: the 2005 special election.
That special election was a disaster for him, wasn't it?
It was a huge reality check.
Yeah.
4 of his key sponsored ballot measures, focused on budgeting, teacher tenure, political reform, were soundly defeated.
And he blamed the money.
He blamed the failure on the massive fundraising effort of the opposition, stating that no one could win if the opposition raised $160 million. That massive campaign funding by public employee unions to defeat him was later scrutinized and partly ruled as involving illegal compulsory fundraising.
Despite that hurdle, he was reelected in 2006 with a solid majority, and he began pivoting toward a legacy that would distinguish him nationally.
He realized he needed to shed the pure partisan image and focus on big, lasting issues. He appointed Democrat Susan Kennedy as his chief of staff. This shift was most apparent in his pioneering environmental leadership.
His environmental record is arguably his most globally influential achievement in office. What did the Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006 actually accomplish?
It was groundbreaking. The Global Warming Solutions Act was the nation's first mandatory comprehensive greenhouse gas emissions cap. It aimed for a 25% reduction by 2020. This was a radical step for a U.S. state.
It positioned California as a global leader on climate policy.
It did. And this commitment earned him significant international recognition, including the European Voice Campaigner of the Year award in 2007.
And his political commitment was reinforced by his personal, visible actions.
He made a massive public show of his personal green commitments, which helped reinforce the credibility of the policy. He converted one of his infamously large Hummers to run on hydrogen.
The ultimate brand evolution.
And another on biofuel, installed solar panels on his home, and championed the development of the California Hydrogen Highway Network. It's the man who essentially invented the civilian H1, now converting it to hydrogen. That transformation itself is a key takeaway for how he continually reinvents his image.
But even as he was preparing to leave office, the sheer force of his political connections led to one of the most controversial decisions of his tenure: the commutation scandal involving Esteban Núñez.
This is critical to understanding the ethical complexity of his power. Esteban Núñez, the son of his powerful political friend, former Assembly Speaker Fabian Núñez, was sentenced to 16 years for voluntary manslaughter in the 2008 death of Luis Santos.
And Schwarzenegger commuted the sentence.
Hours before leaving office, he used his executive discretion to commute that sentence by more than half, down to 7 years.
He claimed the original sentence was excessive, but the method of execution was what caused the tremendous political and emotional fallout.
He acted with zero transparency. The commutation was performed without following protocol, specifically without informing the victim's family, the Santos family, or the San Diego County prosecutors.
They learned about it from a reporter.
Yes. The pain and sense of betrayal for the victim's parents were profound.
And the judicial response reflected that moral repugnance.
The Santos family sued. A Sacramento County Superior Court judge ultimately ruled that while the act itself, the commutation, was legal under the governor's broad powers, the way it was carried out was distasteful and repugnant to the bulk of the citizenry.
And it had legislative consequences.
It led to new laws in California requiring victim notification prior to any such executive commutation. It was a raw example of political patronage overriding justice protocol.
Following his departure from office, Schwarzenegger's political voice hasn't diminished. It's simply focused internationally on climate issues and domestically on confronting the populist right.
He quickly launched R20 Regions of Climate Action and the annual Austrian World Summit in Vienna, establishing himself as a global, nonpartisan climate advocate. Domestically, he became one of the most prominent Republican critics of the rising populist movement, issuing strong public condemnations of Donald Trump.
He used particularly powerful historical language in his criticism of the January 6th Capitol attack.
He did. Given his family history, he likened the January 6th attack to Kristallnacht, calling it a deliberate act to break the country. He has not held back, explicitly calling Trump the worst president ever.
And he finally broke with the party.
Marking his final political break with the modern GOP, he endorsed Kamala Harris in 2024, the first time since becoming a citizen in 1983 that he did not vote for the Republican nominee. He is now using his political platform entirely for causes, climate, and democracy that transcend party lines.
It's a complete repositioning of his political brand, leveraging his past credibility to address the present moment. We've seen the ambition that built a body and built a political office. Now let's look at the financial engine and the intimate hidden cost of that decades-long ambition.
That leads us directly to part 4, personal realities, wealth, and enduring legacy. What often gets lost is that Schwarzenegger was a tremendous business mind before he was a movie star.
His business acumen and financial empire are often overshadowed by the action persona, but he was a self-made millionaire by age 25, well before Conan or the Terminator.
His discipline applied to money just as it applied to muscle. He started small in 1968, starting a bricklaying business with fellow bodybuilder Franco Colombo.
And they were savvy about it.
They leveraged the increased demand after the 1971 San Fernando earthquake to make it profitable, immediately rolling all profits into investments. They quickly expanded into a mail-order fitness business, selling equipment and instructional tapes. He wasn't spending his money, he was relentlessly growing it.
He treated his financial life like compound interest on steroids.
That's a perfect way to put it. Real estate was his true financial muscle builder. He purchased his first apartment building for just $10,000 and aggressively expanded, eventually making millions by diversifying his real estate holdings both in the U.S. and internationally.
He also dabbles in celebrity enterprises, like Planet Hollywood.
Yes, alongside Stallone and Willis. However, his decision to exit Planet Hollywood in 2000 is telling of his focused business strategy. He wasn't sentimental.
No.
He decided to sever ties because the restaurant wasn't achieving the success he hoped for, stating he needed to focus on new U.S. global business ventures. He is relentless about cutting losses and moving on to higher yield opportunities.
Today, his estimated net worth, according to 2024 Forbes estimates, makes him an estimated billionaire.
And he famously declined his $175,000 governor's salary, underscoring his financial independence from public service. That financial power gave him political freedom.
And that independence is reflected in his unusual passions, specifically his obsession with large vehicles.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about the tank and the Hummer.
His passion for heavy military equipment stems from seeing Allied occupation forces in Austria during his youth. He paid $20,000 to import his old Austrian Army M47 Patton tank, which he now famously uses for charity events, teaching kids about fitness.
But more significant commercially, he was the driving force behind the civilian Humvee.
He lobbied AM General to create the street-legal version, the Hummer H1.
He saw the potential and forced the product into existence, becoming the first civilian owner in the U.S. in 1992.
It's a perfect metaphor for his career. If the job, the role, or the vehicle he wants doesn't exist, he will use his will and influence to literally manifest it.
Now let's move to his family and personal reckoning. The intense ambition required to manage 3 careers clearly came at a significant personal cost.
It did. His early relationships were often defined by his singular focus. His 5-year relationship with Barbara Outland Baker, an English teacher, ended largely because she wanted an ordinary, solid life, which he admitted he hated.
He needed a partner who could handle the extraordinary path.
After an open relationship with Sue Murray, he met Maria Shriver in 1977.
Their marriage, a political and social powerhouse, lasted 25 years before their separation in 2011, and the divorce was finalized in 2021. The separation was triggered by a profound, heartbreaking betrayal.
The ultimate reckoning came with the revelation that he had fathered a son, Joseph Biina, with their longtime household employee, Mildred Patricia Biina. The timeline of this affair caused immense pain.
The sources show the 2 boys, Joseph Biina and his youngest son, with Maria Shriver, Christopher, were born only 5 days apart.
That's correct. Arnold stated that he didn't piece the truth together until the child was 7 or 8 years old and began looking like him.
And Maria eventually confronted him.
After confirming her own suspicions, it was a massive personal failure for a man whose public life was built on strength and control.
He has since owned that failure publicly.
He has. When reflecting on his life in 2014, he stated clearly that he is least proud of the mistakes he made that caused his family pain and split us up. He took full financial responsibility for Joseph Baena and his mother, establishing them in a separate home in Bakersfield. It's an unavoidable, complex part of his legacy.
Finally, let's wrap up by looking at his current focus, which circles back to his original mission of optimizing the body, health, and public image.
Health has become paramount, largely due to a lifelong congenital condition, a bicuspid aortic valve.
Meaning the valve has 2 leaflets instead of the usual 3.
Right, and this requires constant monitoring and surgical intervention.
He has endured 3 major heart surgeries over the years.
The first was an elective replacement in 1997, but the sources highlight the difficulty of the 2018 emergency open heart surgery, followed by a third aortic valve surgery in 2020. The 2018 recovery was particularly difficult.
For a man who defined himself by physical control, the sudden vulnerability must have been crippling.
He was seriously challenged, admitting he had to use a walker, and felt frustrated and angry because he couldn't immediately see the path back to his old physical self.
But in true Schwarzenegger fashion,
He applied his visualization and goal-setting rules to his recovery, attacking rehabilitation with the same intensity he used to train for Mr. Olympia.
and that health focus has also led to a massive dietary shift, tying his personal life back to his environmental advocacy.
The influence of director James Cameron, a prominent environmentalist, has been noted here. For the past 5 years, Arnold has committed to an approximate 80% plant-based diet, citing both the documented health benefits related to heart disease and the environmental benefits of reducing meat consumption.
This holistic approach, physical, political, financial, is the theme of his latest philosophical output.
Exactly. His 2023 book, Be Useful: 7 Tools for Life, is the definitive distillation of everything we've discussed today. It dispenses life advice based on his core philosophy: relentless goal setting, visualization, and treating life as a high-volume, continuous workout.
So we have tracked the transformation of Arnold Schwarzenegger from the Austrian oak, fleeing poverty and conformity, to the Governator, a global voice on climate, who literally defined the path to success in 3 separate, often contradictory fields.
His life is the ultimate case study in extreme goal setting and self-invention. Our sources reveal a figure whose ambition drove him to incredible decisions, from the competitive ruthlessness and steroid controversies of the 70s to the controversial political commutation and the profound pain caused by family betrayal. Yet, those same extreme drives led to historic, groundbreaking achievements, whether dominating bodybuilding, pioneering blockbuster action, or signing the nation's first comprehensive cap on greenhouse gas emissions.
It's the quintessential American success story built by an Austrian rebel who refused to conform to any set limits.
And that raises a powerful final question about the nature of American possibility. We've discussed how Arnold achieved political office despite the constitutional limits on presidential ambition because he is not a natural-born citizen.
And that's the lingering thought we leave you with, the learner, today.
Considering his dual Austrian-American citizenship and unique political trajectory, if the U.S. Constitution were amended to allow a foreign-born citizen of his stature to run, how would the disciplined bodybuilder's ultimate vision for the nation compare to the moderate, environmentally focused vision he implemented for California, and what would that tell us about the ultimate limits, or lack thereof, of the American dream he so successfully embodied?
Something profound to mull over until our next deep dive.